Hi guys, so today's session is going to be on the maths paper 3 that is tomorrow. Please make sure you're on mute, and any questions you have, just put them in the chat and I should hopefully answer them as I'm going. So we'll just get started because we've got quite a few questions to do. So for all exam boards, I'm sure it's all calculator paper. Your final paper is your calculator paper. So all the questions we're doing today are going to be calculator based. Okay, so let's move on to question 1. Question 1 says, last year Kelly's car insurance cost £340. This year her car insurance costs 8% more. Work out the cost of Kelly's car insurance this year. So what you're essentially doing is working out how much more it's going to cost this year. So it's 8% more. So you're working out 8% of £340 and then adding it on top because it's costing that much amount more. So with the calculator, how you find I'm going to be doing 8% of £340. And how I do that on the calculator is I do my percentage divided by 100 times by 340. If I put that in my calculator, that gives me £27.20. So 8% of 340 is £27.20. And then my final step is I need to add it on because it's costing that much amount more. So my starting amount, my last year's amount, which is £340, plus my increase, which is £27.20. If I add that on, that gives me £367.20. So insurance cost this year will be £367.20. So moving on, Charlie sells cars. Each month he is paid £1,800 plus. So £1,800 plus a bonus. The bonus is 2% of the total values of cars he sells that month. So last month, Charlie was paid £2,535. Work out the total value of the cars he sold last month. So we need to work out what the bonus was that he got essentially. So last month, Charlie was paid £2,535. So we know he got a standard pay of £1,800 plus the bonus. So if we do the amount he was paid, £2,535 minus the 1,800 to see how much bonus he got £735 bonus. That's how much he got last month. So we know that. And it says in the question the bonus is 2%. So the value of the bonus, so 2% is that £735. And all I need to do now is find out how much the total bonus was. So I'm going to convert it to 100%. 2% to 100%, you times by 50. £735 times by 50 is 36,750. So that's the total value of the cars he sold last month. 36,750. So to iterate that again, he gets paid £1,800 plus a bonus. So we know he got paid that much minus the £1,800, which is his standard pay. We know he got a £735 bonus, and we know the bonus is 2% of the value of the cars he sells. So if you want to find out what the 100% value of the car was, just convert the 2% to 100%, so using ratio on each side. And we know the value of the car, total value is £36,750. That for 3 marks. So altogether, that's a 6-mark question. It's all about reading the question, really. If you can read it, understand the question, it's just simple, either multiplying, dividing, adding, or subtracting. Right, next question. Question 2 says, in London, 1.25 kilograms of potatoes costs £1.45. In Dublin, 2 kilograms of potatoes cost €3.49. The exchange rate is £1 equals £1, 19 euros. In which city are potatoes better value for money, in London or Dublin? So we've got exchange rates as well as best buys. So they've combined in. So we can see London, the London price, and we could see the Dublin price. So first of all, let's do the London price because that's already given to us in pounds. So with currencies, you have to stick to the same currency. So either you convert everything to pound, I'm going to convert everything to euros. I'm going to convert everything to pounds. So with London, I can see 1.25 kg of potatoes costs me £1.45. And with Best Buys, it's always using the best way to do it is using ratios. I want to know how much 1 kilogram of potato is going to cost, so I'm going to divide each side by 1.25 first to get 1 kilogram, and then £1.45 divided by 1.25 is £1.16. So 1 kg of potatoes in London costs me £1.16. So I can see that clearly. Now I need to do the same for Dublin. So let's do Dublin. So with Dublin, I can see 2 kilograms of potatoes cost me €3.49. So 2 kilograms of potatoes costs me €3.49. So first of all, I'm going to find out how much 1 kilogram of potatoes is going to cost me. 1 kg, so I'm going to divide each side by 2. 1 kilogram of potatoes in Dublin is going to cost me €1.745. So I can see I've gotten both to 1 kilogram. But now the only thing is with Dublin, I need to convert the euros into pounds to compare the pound prices. So the final step is going to be converting this to pounds. So if I convert it, I can see the conversion rate is £1 is €1.19. So I'm going to write that down first. £1 is €1.19. And now I just need to see how much 1.745 euros is in pounds. So I'm going to get €1 first. So I'm going to divide by 1.19 to get €1. And I'm do the same on the other side, divide by 1.19. That just gives me 1/1.19. I'm going to leave it in fractions because I don't simplify your answer until the very last end. So I prefer leaving it as fractions so I don't have to write down the whole number. And then I'm going to get that to 1.745. So I'm going to time my €1 by 1.745. And remember, with ratio, the times on the other side as well. Times by 1.745. So 1/1.19 times 1.745 gives me £1.47. So you can see here in Dublin, 1 kg of potatoes costs me £1.47, whereas in London, 1 kg of potatoes cost me £1.16. So they're cheaper. Cheaper. Make sure you always write your statement cheaper in London. So always end in your statement so they can see clearly which one is cheaper. So this was a combination of Best Buys as well as conversion rates. I found it easier to first do the Best Buy bit and then do the conversion after, just so it's less working out. So if we move on to question 3. Right, question 3 is a frequency table where you have to work out the averages. This is a very common question that I can imagine them putting in the paper tomorrow. So the question says Adam is measuring the heights in centimeters of his tomato plant. So we've got the heights here and we've got the frequency. Just frequency just tells us how many are in that height range. So we've got 7 tomato plants that are in the height between 140 to 150. We've got 10 in the range 151 to 160. So the frequency just tells us how many of them are in that height range. And the question says estimate the mean height. So to calculate the mean from a frequency table, because we've got group frequency, these are grouped here, we need 2 extra fields. So I always add them on the side. So first of all, we need the midpoint. If the height was just in single numbers, for example, 140, 150, then we don't need the midpoint. But because we've got a group, we've got a range, we have to find the midpoint of that range. So first of all, we're going to do the midpoint, and then the last column is going to be the frequency times the midpoint. Okay, so if I just complete this table, so another thing to cover, to find the midpoint, if you can't figure it out from looking at it, the easiest way, because you have a calculator in this paper, it's easy to do. All you do is you add both the sides. I'm going to do 140 plus 150 and then divide it by 2. So just add these two numbers and then divide by 2. That gives you the midpoint. So that midpoint of the first column is 145, 150, 160. The midpoint is 155. 165, 175. And just be wary of this one. The midpoint is 180. So if I do 180 plus 200, which is 380, 380 divided by 2 is 190. And then all I'm doing for the last column is multiplying these two columns. So 7 times 145 is 1015. That is 1550. 2,475, 3,325, and 1,710. So we've done all the working out. So now the mean from a frequency table is always the frequency times midpoint sum. So the sum of that column, which is this one here, the sum of this column here, divided by the sum of this column here. So the sum of the frequency times midpoint, so if I add them all together, that gives me 10,075. And if I add up all the frequency, that gives me 60. So now all I'm going to do is this column divided by that column. So 10,075 divided by 60. And it says give it to one decimal place. If I put that in my calculator, that gives me 167.9 to 1 dp. So the mean height is 167.9 centimeters. That's how you calculate the mean. And on the topic of this, let's just quickly go over how you calculate the other averages. The mode is the most common height. So if you look at it, the most common height is 19, and 19 lies within this height. So 170 to 180, that's the mode. So the mode isn't 19, the mode is actually the field on this part here. So it's not the actual frequency. The range is just the biggest value take away the smallest value. So 19 take away 7. 19 take away 7 is 12. And the median, so how you calculate the median, is the frequency, which is 60, plus 1 divided by 2. That gives us the 30.5th place. That's where the median lies. So then you have to do a running total of the frequency. So the first number is 7. So that stays at 7. Then we do 7 plus 10 is 17. So it needs to lie, we need to get to 30.5. And then 17 plus 15 is 32. And 30.5 lies here. So the median would lie in the 160 to 170. That's where the median would lie. So that's how you calculate all 4 averages from your frequency table. So moving on, explain why your answer to part A is an estimate. The reason why it's an estimate is because we use the midpoint of these values, because these values were grouped in intervals. We had to use the midpoint, so it's not accurate. It's an estimate because we used the midpoint values. And not the real heights, not the actual heights. as they were given in intervals. Yeah, so we didn't actually use the actual height, we used the midpoint of the interval, so that's why it's an estimate. So that's how you do averages from frequency table. It's the same thing every single time. The only difference is they might give you intervals, which we've got here, or they might give you single numbers. If it's single numbers, you don't need to work out the midpoint. You just do frequency times by the height, and then you would do the same thing. The mean would be the frequency times the height divided by the frequency, the sum of them. So moving on to question 4. So this question is a volume question. The diagram shows an empty tank in the shape of a cylinder. The cylinder has a radius 12. So we've got a radius 12 and height 45. Water flows in the tank at a rate of 1.8 liters per minute. Calculate the number of minutes it will take to completely fill the tank. So first of all, if you don't understand the question, if you can do parts of the question, at least attempt it, you can get a few marks. So we are working out the volume because the radius is given to us and the height is. So the volume of a cylinder is pi times r squared times h. We've got r, we've got the radius, and we've got the actual height. Remember, it's the vertical height, not the slanted height. So h is vertical height. And whenever you see L, that's slanted height. So remember the difference between them two. Okay, so we've just put the values in, pi times 12 squared times by the height, which is 45. If I just put that in the calculator, that gives me 20,357.52 centimeters cubed. So we found the volume. However, the question says water flows in the tank at a rate of 1.8 liters per minute. That's given in liters per minute. And if we know our unit conversions, which is something everyone needs to memorize, we know 1 liter is 1,000 centimeters cubed. So to convert this centimeter cube to liters, to know how quickly it will fill the tank will fill up, we need to go from centimeters cubed to liters, which is dividing by 1,000. So I'm going to divide this. I'm going to divide my volume by 1,000. If I divide by 1,000, it will give me the units in liters. So the volume of the cylinder is 20.35752 liters. Okay, so now the final step would be calculate the number of minutes it will take to completely fill the tank, and then the water flows in the tank at a rate of 1.8 liters per minute. So the final step would be dividing your liters, which was 20.35752 by 1.8, because it flows, the water flows into the tank at a rate of 1.8 liters per minute. If you divide it, that will tell us how long it's going to take. That will take 11.3 minutes. And it says give your answer to the nearest minute. So 11.3 to the nearest minute, that is less than 5, so we're just going to round it down to 11 minutes. So that's the nearest whole minute. So that's that question, 11 minutes. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So this is a inverse proportion. So water flows through each of the hoses that fill a swimming pool at the same rate. It takes 3 of the hoses 6 hours to fill the swimming pool. Work out how many hours it's going to take 2 of the hoses to fill 3/4 of the swimming pool. So it takes 3 of the hoses 6 hours. Work out how many hours it's going to take 2 of the hoses to fill 3/4. So with this kind of question, you have to think in your head, if we're going to have more hoses, it's gonna the tanks, the swimming pool is gonna fill up quicker because there's more hoses doing the job. If we have less hoses, it's gonna take more time because there's less hoses being able to fill the swimming pool. So if we write it down as a ratio, first of all, it takes 3 hoses, 6 hours. We need to get to 2 hoses. So first of all, I'm gonna find out how long it's gonna take one hose. So if I go from 3 to 1 divided by 3, 3 divided by 3 is one hose. I'm gonna double it, I'm gonna times it by 3 on the other side. So I'm gonna do the opposite sign because the less hoses you have, the more time it's gonna take. So 6 times 3 is 18. So it's gonna take one hose 3 times the amount of time to fill the swimming pool. So one hose takes 18 hours to fill the pool. Now we need to find out how much it's going to take two hoses. So if I go from one hose to now two hoses, I'm gonna, because that times on that side, I'm gonna divide on that side because if you have more hoses, it's gonna fill up quicker. So 18 divided by 2 is 9 hours to fill the pool. So we know it takes two hoses, 9 hours to fill the pool, but we only want 3/4 of the pool. So we're gonna do 3/4 of the 9 hours. We just do that in the calculator. 3/4 times 9. That gives me, it's going to take 6.75 hours for the two hoses to fill up 3/4 of the pool. So that's that question there. So one thing to remember for these questions is you have to think logically. So it's the same thing, like if you have 5 painters decorating a room, it's going to get done quicker. But if you have one painter decorating a room, it's going to take more time because one person has to do more of the work. Same thing here, if we have more hoses, it's going to take less time because there's more hoses filling up a pool. But if you have less hoses, it's going to take more time because they're doing the same amount of work, but there's only one of them. So remember with these questions, whatever you do you divide on one side, you have to times on the other side. So moving on. Here is a right angle triangle. Work out the value of x. So one thing to always check when you have a right angle triangle is either you're going to be using Pythagoras or you're going to be using SOH CAH TOA. The only difference is for Pythagoras, you're only working out lengths. For SOH CAH TOA, it involves lengths and angles. So in this case here, we don't have any angles, or we are finding a missing length, so we are going to be doing Pythagoras. Okay, so let's write Pythagoras' theorem out first. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So let's label our sides. So first things first, always label your side so you can see what you're actually trying to work out. The slanted side is always C, and then A and B, it doesn't matter which way you put. So I'm going to put A here and I'm going to put B here. So we've been given C, we've been given A, we need to find B. So I'm going to rearrange this equation first to find B. So B squared is going to equal C squared minus A squared. So if you rearrange that, to make B squared the subject to find B, I'm going to do C squared, take away A squared. So that is the formula version I'm going to be using. So always rearrange first and then you can put your numbers in. So I'm just going to sub my numbers in. B squared equals C squared, which is 12.5 squared, take away 3.5 squared. If I just put that in the calculator, B squared is 144. And just remember, you need to find B, not B squared. So to get rid of the square root, sorry, to get rid of the squared, you have to square root the other side. So B is going to equal square root of 144, which is 12 centimeters, which makes sense. Okay, so X, the length of X is just 12 centimeters. So that is a Pythagoras question. And they might ask Pythagoras or SOH CAH TOA will definitely come up tomorrow. So make sure you do go through all of them questions and every different scenario. With Pythagoras, it's only finding a missing length, and the main thing is if you rearrange your formula beforehand, then you can see clearly where your numbers go. But with SOH it's a little bit more effort. So now this question here. So this is again a right angle triangle. So let's see what it's asking us. Calculate the side of angle BAC. So kids always get confused. Which angle are they talking about? The angle that they're talking about is always the middle number, sorry, the middle letter. So it's going to be angle A. So it's going to be this angle A. So I need to find that. So again, I have to think, am I using Pythagoras or am I using SOH CAH? Pythagoras is only for lengths, but in this case, they're asking me to find an angle, so I am going to be using SOH CAH. So in this case, we have a side called hypotenuse, a side called opposite, which is opposite to the angle given, and then what if you put square? What if you put square root over over the equation? Also, you mean like if you wrote this like this, b equals square root of 12.5 squared minus 3.5 squared, like that? Yeah, you can do it that way. I just prefer to do it in 2 steps, just so I know I'm not making a mistake. You can do it that way, but just always double check that you're doing the brackets first, because remember, BIDMAS always comes in. Higher and foundation need to know SOH CAH and Pythagoras. I think a lot of higher kids forget that they also need to know everything in foundation. So anything of that can come up as well, because they tend to focus a lot on the higher stuff. So like a sine rule and cosine rule, but you forget that you also need to know Pythagoras and SOH CAH, because they're most likely going to mix them in with other topics. So as I was saying, in SOH CAH you have a side called hypotenuse, a side called opposite, and the final side is called adjacent. And how we label these is hypotenuse is a slanted side. So in this case, the hypotenuse is going to be here. Opposite side is always opposite the angle that they're given or they're asking you to find, not the right angle. So don't get confused with that. That's going to be the opposite side. And the last side is always going to be adjacent. So in this case, they have given us the opposite side. They have also given us the adjacent side, so we don't need to work with hypotenuse. So we need to find which trig value contains O and A. So O and A is tan. So we're going to be using tan in this case. So I always tell the kids, yeah, the higher one does start at 6:30, but the foundation one is 5:30 till 6:30. So I always tell the kids, draw the triangle, then you can see how you're rearranging the equation, because a lot of kids mess up on rearranging. So how you write them for all 3 trig values is, your trig value goes here. So tan x is going to be O divided by A. So if I'm finding A is going to be O divided by tan x. If I'm finding opposite is going to be tan x times A. So it's always useful drawing this triangle on the side so you can see how you're rearranging the question, because sometimes they might ask you to find one of the lengths and you have to rearrange the equation. And remember, your x, so tan, your angle always goes next to your trig value. So that x represents the angle given. So in this case, we have to work out the angle given. So we are going to be using tan of x, because we don't know the angle, equals opposite, so the opposite side, which is 9, divided by the adjacent side, which is 5. And whenever you're trying to find x, you need to take the tan bit, the trig value, to the other side. And how you do that is you do the inverse of your trig value. So it's going to look something like this. X equals tan to the power of -1 times 9/5. And how you get your trig value, your inverse trig value, you do shift on your calculator, press shift and your actual sign trig value, it will give the inverse trig values. So just extra step of doing shift. And if I write that on my calculator, x equals tan to the power of -1 times 9/5, that gives me 60.9 degrees to 1 decimal place. So that's my angle. My angle is 60.9. So in this case, so if I just rearrange it, if they tell you to find the adjacent side, So adjacent side is going to be opposite divided by tan times your angle, or opposite side is going to be adjacent times your angle. So it's handy to draw the triangle so you can see how you're rearranging it. So moving on. So this question here, this is a probability tree because it's using probabilities. So Bradley gets a bus on Saturday and Sunday. The probability that Bradley's bus will be late on any day is 0.2. Complete the probability diagram. So we know all probabilities, quadratic simultaneous equations is higher. So I'm not going to be going over that topic in the foundation class. So we know 1 take away 0.2 is 0.8. So the probability of him not being late on any day is going to be 0.8. So him being late on any day is 0.2. So if the bus is late, it's going to be 0.2. The bus is not late, it's going to be 0.8. Bus is late is 0.2, that's going to be 0.8. Bus is late is 0.2, that's going to be 0.8. With probability tree, you have to remember each branch should add up to 1, which they do. So just be wary of that. Each branch adds up to 1. So just double check that each of your branch does, otherwise you will know you've gone wrong. That's why I did this here. So that's the first part of the question, which is easy to mark. Just fill in the graph, fill in the diagram. And the second part says, work out the probability, to find the probability that Bradley's bus is late on at least one of the days. So on at least one of the days, it has to be late. So what that means is it can be late on both days, or on one day. Either the Saturday or the Sunday given, it can be late, or it can be late on both days. So how you write this is, it's going to be the probability will be either on Saturday he's going to be late, so the bus is going to be late, and it's going to be late. Or the probability is going to be late, or it's not going to be late. So I'm going to write late and not late. Or it can have not late and late. So I've worked out what combination I can have. So it can be late on both the days because it said the Bradley's bus is late on at least one of the days. So on one of the days it can be late, or it can be late on both days. So remember, and whenever you see an and, you're timesing your probabilities. Whenever you see an or, you're adding your probabilities. So first, let's work out what's the probability is going to be late and late. Late and late is going to be 0.2 times 0.2, which equals 0.04. So we've got the probability that it's going to be late, which is 0.04. Probability is going to be late and not late, which is going to be 0.2 times 0.8, which is 0.16. That's going to be 0.16. And then the last one is probability is not late and late, which is going to be 0.8 times 0.2, which is 0.16. So that's going to be 0.16. And whenever we see an or, we have to add. So we're going to add these all up. 0.4 add 0.16 and 0.16 is 0.36. So that's the probability that Bradley's bus is late on at least one of the days. So it's important to understand the question, what the question is saying. If the question said he has to be late only on one of the days, then it's only going to be late, not late, and not late and late. So you can only be late on one of the days, or he has to be late on both days. It's going to be late and late only. So it depends on what the question is asking. It's very important to highlight the question to understand what it's asking of you. And remember, when you're doing ands, you're timesing going across the tree diagram, and then you're adding wherever you see or going downwards. So let's move on to the next question. So question 9 says triangle ABC and triangle DEF are similar, so it's to do with similar shapes. Work out the length of DE. So with similar shapes, it's important to remember the sides which are corresponding. So let's just say, for example, this side is corresponding to this side. So they're the same sides. This side is corresponding to this side because it's the same side. Just remember, with similar shapes, sometimes the shape can be rotated. So always draw them the right way around next to each other so you can see which side is corresponding. And then the last side, this side is corresponding to this side. So we can see, and then this angle is corresponding to this angle. So we can see, so the question says, work out the length of DE. Which one is DE? So we need this length here. So with similar shapes, you have to work out a scale factor. Once you have the scale factor, then you can work out the length of any shapes. So we know, so you always find they will always give you the length, two of the lengths of the same corresponding side. So we can see this length is given, and this length is given, and they are the corresponding sides. So with that, you can find out the scale factor. Your scale factor is new length, or the length of the bigger shape, divided by the old length, or the length of the smaller shape. So the length of the bigger shape is 24, length of the smaller shape is 20. Put that in my calculator, my scale factor is 1.2. So you can see I've got my scale factor, and then using that, I can work out the length of any shape. Another factor to remember, when you're working out the scale factor of the bigger shape, you always multiply by the scale factor. When you're working out the length of the smaller shape, you divide by scale factor. So just remember that, multiply when you're finding out the lengths of any of the bigger shape, and you divide when you're finding out the length of the smaller shape. So the first question says work out the length of DE. DE is this one. So we can see the corresponding side is 18.6. So we're going to use that to find the length of that. So we're going to do 18.6 because it's a bigger shape. We're going to times by the scale factor, times by 1.2, which is just 22.32. 22.32. The next question says work out the length of AC. AC is this one, so we can see the corresponding length is on this, the bigger shape, and we're finding the length of, using that to find the length of the smaller shape. So we're going to do 28.8 divide by 1.2, because when you're finding the length of a smaller shape, divide, that is 24 centimeters. Then it says work out the size of the angle DCE. So this one thing to remember, the angles stay the same. Corresponding angles, so the angles that match with the other shape, are on the same side and everything. Corresponding angles stay the same. So if that's 49, that's also going to be 49 because it's on the same side. So we say these two triangles are similar because the bigger triangle has been enlarged, all the sides have been enlarged by a scale factor by the same amount uh, from the smaller shape. So it can't be the case that this side is multiplied by 1.2, that side is multiplied by another number. They have to be, all the sides have to be multiplied by the same scale factor, which is 1.2, which does make sense. So that is similar shapes using scale factors. Next question. Question 10 says, Manan invests £3,000 in a savings account for 5 years. The savings account pays compound interest at a rate of 2.4% per annum. Calculate the total amount of interest. We want the total amount of interest Manan will have after 5 years. So we are using the compound interest formula. We know compound interest is starting amount multiplied by the multiplier, which we have to find, to the power of number of years. So we've got the starting amount. Starting amount is £3,000. We've got the number of years, which is 5%. We need to work out the multiplier from your percentage. How you find the multiplier is, because this is, it hasn't said it's being decreased or anything, it's being increased. So we're going to be doing 100 plus your percentage, which is 2.4, divided by 100. If you put that in the calculator, that gives me 1.024. And you do that if it's an increase. in this case, it hasn't really specified that it's a percentage, the compound interest is a loss or a decrease. So we assume it's an increase. If it is a decrease or a percentage loss, we do 100 minus your percentage divided by 100. That's how you find the multiplier. So we've got the multiplier, which is 1.24. All I'm going to do is put everything in my formula. So the compound interest is going to be starting amount, which is £3,000, times by the multiplier 1.024 to the power of 5 years, because it's number of years. And that gives me, at the end of the 5 years, in his bank account, his money will have grown to £3,377.70. That's the final amount with the interest. But this question is saying to you, what decimal place do you leave what to? Sorry. This one here. Yeah, because we're dealing with money, it's always 2 decimal places. Money is only to 2 DP, so always do it to 2 decimal places. The question in itself is asking you what's the total amount of interest he's earned. So the total amount of interest he's earned, so interest earned will be the final amount in his bank minus the starting amount. So you find the difference between them, you'll actually see how much interest was added on top of that. So the final amount was £3,377.70 minus £3,000, which was what he started off with. So the amount of interest he's earned is £377.70. So just remember that with compound interest, the final amount, it tells you how much your account has grown to with your interest. So it's a combination of your starting amount plus your interest. It doesn't actually tell you what interest was added on top. So you have to minus your starting amount from your final amount to see how much was actually added on top. So that is compound interest. So moving on, this is a algebra question. Simplify. So simplify that. So how I tend to approach it is I separate each of the values. So 18 divided by 6 times a to the power of 10 divided by a to the power of 2 times b to the power of 15 divided by b to the power of 3, because you can only divide times numbers with letters that are the same. So I can see 18 divided by 6 is just 3, right? A to the power of 10 divided by a to the power of 2. We know when you're dividing, the law of indices says you have to minus the powers. So I'm going to be doing 10 take away 2, which we're left with 8. So that's going to be a to the power of 8. And same thing here. 15 take away minus 3, which gives me 15 plus 3, which is just 18. And that's b to the power of 18. So it's easier to separate each numbers and letters that are the same. That way you can see clearly what you're doing. This question says 3 to the power of 30 times 3 to the power of 5 in brackets, the power of 100 equals 3 to the power of k. We need to find the value of k. So here again, BIDMAS comes into play. So 3 to the power of 30 times 3 to the power of 5 to the power of 100. So BIDMAS and indices. So it's 2 topics. So we can see in BIDMAS, brackets comes first. So we're doing the brackets part first. So when it's timesing, you have to add the powers. So that's going to become 3 to the power of 30 plus 5 is 35 to the power of 100. And then when you have powers on the inside a bracket and then you have a power on the outside, you have to multiply. That's an add, that's a multiply. So that's going to become 35 times 100, which is 3,500. So that's going to become 3 to the power of 3,500. And we can see k is just 3,500. So it's just a matter of proving what k is. I think kids get confused and they try solving it by bringing that on the other side. It's not that. All you're trying to do is find the value of k. So it's actually giving you what the number is, and you just need to find out what k is. And moving on, we've only got 15 more minutes. We've got 3 more questions to do. Laura runs for 25 minutes at an average speed of 12 kilometers per hour. Tammy runs for 40 minutes. At what speed would Tammy need to run to complete the exact same distance as Laura? This is going to be speed, distance, and times. So I'm just going to draw the triangle here to see what I'm working with. Speed equals distance divided by time. So let's first work out the distance of Laura, because at what speed would Tammy need to run to complete the exact same distance as Laura? So we need to find out the distance of Laura. So we have the time and we have the speed. However, one thing that kids always forget is they don't check the units. This is kilometers per hour and this is given us minutes. So we need to convert the minutes into hours. So we know hour to minutes to second. We need to know the conversions. To go from hour to minutes, you turn by 60. To go from minutes to seconds, you turn by 60. And then it's divide the other way around. So we need to convert the minutes into hours. So minutes to hours is you divide by 60. So first of all, I'm going to do 25 divided by 60. That gives me 5/12 of an hour. Or you can write 0.416 recurring, but I don't like writing recurring decimal, so I'm just going to leave it as 5/12. And then to find the distance equals the speed times the time. The speed is 12 kilometers per hour times by 5/12. The distance is therefore 5 kilometers. So we've got Laura's distance. So now it says, at what speed would Tammy need to run to complete the exact same distance? So we have Laura's time. So this time we are working out the speed. Speed equals distance divided by time. So we have the distance. Distance is 5 kilometers. Again, the time, we need to convert that into hours because the speed is given to us in kilometers per hours. So I'm going to convert Tammy's time, which is 40, divided by 60 to get it into hours. That's going to be 2/3 of an hour, or 0.6 recurring, but I'm going to leave it as a fraction because it's easier to write in the calculator. So therefore my speed is going to be the distance, which is 5, divided by the time, which is 2/3. 5 divided by 2/3 gives me 7.5 kilometers per hour. So that's the speed you need to run at to complete the exact same distance as Laura. So with speed, distance, and time graph, always first look at your units. More or less, you're going to be converting. It's always a case of converting the time. Kids tend to get confused. So if I just give you a tip, if the time is given as 5.2 hours, I need to convert it to hours. This bit is the hours, but we can't have 0.2 of an hour because we have 5 hours, which is given to us, but we need to convert the decimal bit. We can't leave the decimal bit of an hour into minutes because time is always hours and minutes. So to convert from hours to minutes, you turn by 60. So you're going to do 0.2 times 60, which is 12 minutes. So 5.2 hours is 5 hours, 12 minutes. So always remember that the decimal place, always convert that into your minutes. And that's how you would write it. And then if you're converting from your minutes to hours, you divide by 60. So it's just in the case of looking at what units they're asking you to find and then converting it. So moving on, question 13. This is a bounds question, or we can say intervals. I know Hires calls it bounds. Foundation kids call it intervals. So a number h is written correct to one decimal place. The result is 4.2. Complete the error interval for x. So we're finding error intervals. The key in the question is look at what's given to you, one decimal place. So one decimal place looks like this, 0.1. The result is 4.2. I always draw a number line and I put 4.2 in the middle. And you're gonna add the one decimal place on and you're gonna minus the one decimal place on the other side. So 4.2 add 1 is 4. Add 0.1 is 4.3. 4.2 minus 0.1 is 4.1. So you've added the one decimal place and you minus the one decimal place. And then all you need to do is find the middle value, and that will give you your error interval. If you don't know how to work it out, if you can't see it, all you need to do is you do 4.2, add 4.3, divided by 2, that gives me 4.25. In this case, I'm going to do 4.1, add 4.2, divided by 2, that gives me 4.15. So my error interval is just 4.15 and then H and 4.25. Usually they will give this, they will write this order out. You just need to fill in the numbers, but that's not including this one. So always look at, if it was 2 decimal places, then it would be, you would add 0.01 to each side. If it was 3 decimal places, you would add 0.001 to each side. So it's just about looking at what they've asked you, what decimal place. You add that on, minus it on, then find the middle value. And then your error interval is always the 2 middle values on each side. So last question. The question says, the diagram shows a sphere with radius 6 centimeters. The sphere is made from metal with a density of 8 grams per centimeters cubed. Work out the mass of the sphere, give your answer to 4 significant figures. So it's asking us to work out the mass of the sphere. If we just draw the triangle for mass, density, and volume, we know density is mass divided by volume. So it's asking us to find the mass. The mass is going to be density times by the volume. The density has been given to us. We just need to work out the volume, and then that's why it's given us the volume of a sphere formula, because we're going to be using that to find the volume. So if we find the volume of the sphere, the volume of sphere is 4/3 times by pi times by the radius cube. So the radius is 6 centimeters cube. If they do give you the diameter is from one end of the circle to the other end, you just do half it to get the radius. So just remember that. If they might trick you by giving you the diameter, just half that to get the radius. So the diameter equals a half radius. So if I put that in my calculator, again, I'm not going to write the full number, so I'm going to leave it in terms of pi because your calculator gives it that way. Because don't simplify till the end. I'm going to leave it in terms of pi. So the volume, we've worked it out. Now the final step is working out the mass. The mass is going to be the density, which is 8 grams per centimeter cubed. 8 times by 288 pi, which is just 7,238.229474 grams. And then the question says, give your answer to 4 significant figures. So the 4 significant figures, there's my first, there's my second, there's my third, there's my fourth. And I'm going to look at the next number to know if I'm going to round my 4th significant figure up or down. That is less than 5, so it's going to stay at 7,238 grams. That's how that question stays. So that is the final question for foundation maths, and good luck with tomorrow's session. Just memorize all the formulas and make sure you use your calculator for everything.